everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leaders Podcast. Leaders Podcast gives me the opportunity to speak to influential leaders in the investigation and intelligence industry from all over the world. Over the last few weeks, I've been speaking to some exceptional guys, some exceptional leaders that have done some remarkable things in the private sector. And today, I have a very special guest. I'm joined by Brig Barker. Brig Barker, welcome to the show. Brig Barker is based in Colorado, USA, and Brig has had a fascinating career. Can't wait to hear all about it. So Brig, welcome. Give us a short introduction.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I've kind of admired you and all your work from afar and your team. So thanks for everything you guys do every day. Real quick, after college, I was an Army officer for 5 years, based in Europe, and then did a tour in northern Iraq, and then I did a career in the FBI. And I started out violent crime work in Los Angeles, going to bank robberies and things like that, and then ended up in the counterterrorism realm, where I spent the rest of my career, in probably a lot of that in Africa. Opened up a couple of the Attaché offices there, and then retired. And then I had my own private security investigations company after that. So, essentially made a lot of mistakes along the way, watched a lot of people that were really good at things and learned from them. But glad to be here today. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, you skimmed over decades of career very quickly there, Brig. I'm going to break this down. So in Africa, tell me, you said you opened up a couple of attaché offices. What did that involve, and whereabouts in Africa? I mean, Africa's a huge continent. Give us a little bit of a backstory there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my intro, kind of my foray into Africa was 1998. I went over for the embassy bombings in Nairobi, Kenya, where when we got there, the briefing was some tall Arab guy, essentially led to this attack on U.S. interests, which was Osama bin Laden, as we later found out. But we didn't know much. We were working out of a hotel, kind of making it up every day. But that kind of led me into that, and I thought, this is what I want to do. So I started kind of rotating over to Africa on and off. As far as offices opened, I opened the office in Freetown, Sierra Leone, to initiate the Blood Diamond investigation. So I covered down on Sierra Leone and Liberia in 2006. But we were also opening up that office just for diplomatic purposes, and then kind of bookending it. My last one was in Tunisia, up in North Africa. In Tunis, and at the time it was hot with ISIS activity, so that was kind of the bookend of my career, and got to open up the office there, but also deal with a lot of the counterterrorism issues that were going on.
Phenomenal. And those are all difficult terrains to navigate, right? There are difficult jurisdictions to operate in, let alone with what you were doing. I recall an investigation we had in Nairobi going back 12, 15 years, and it was a challenging environment. If you don't know the local terrain and if you don't know policy and procedure, you can get yourself into a bit of trouble, right?
Well, and I would say in Sierra Leone, I went by myself. The FBI generally sent us by ourselves to go do these, right? Because there wasn't a lot of funds for support and gear and things and people. And so I went by myself to Sierra Leone. And after I was there for a couple of weeks, I was trying to find an ally, right? That's what we do in investigations. We hit the ground, we're looking for allies, and some countries are more non-permissive, and I found a British compound, the IMAT military folks, and I just went up and kind of, introduced myself and befriended them, and good enough they offered to play golf with me, and that was it for me. I said, I'm all in, and so I was their buddy there while I was there, but that was my ally, and it was extremely helpful, and honestly, it was kind of a fallback location if things went really bad in the country, so I greatly appreciated, that partnership with them.
Yeah, understood. So then once you, let's say, left your official positions, you decided to set up a security consultancy investigation firm. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. Very scary experience. I was working for the man, as we say, for many years. And then I went out, but I had this entrepreneurial bug, and I really wanted to give that a shot. And I love it. I love the entrepreneurial side. I still do. But I was, again, stumbling my way through how does this work, and so, yeah, I set up a Red Rock Global Security Company, and we were kind of doing everything, probably too many things. That was one of the mistakes I made is I said, okay, we're going to do everything, and that doesn't work. And so we had a couple retired CIA folks, FBI, and military guys. We had a small office in Europe, and but we did a lot of work in Africa. Again, I don't know if it was kind of the comfort zone, but yeah, we kind of stepped into whatever the requirements were, whatever kind of showed up at the desk, to do. But a lot of it was just Brig trying to figure out how does this world work, still trying to do investigations, still trying to support clients, and kind of help them along in some of these complicated countries. So again, learned a lot from that experience, and still learn lessons when I look back at that.
What's the biggest difference between working in the public sector compared to coming out into the private sector? What would you say is the biggest difference?
Great question, Mike. I think that if I had to pin it on one thing, it would be authorities. So, on the government side, you have inherent authorities, counterterrorism, counterintelligence, whatever it may be, investigations in general. We have authorities if you're in that position. Out in the scary, kind of out in the public world, investigations wise, I'm always trying to figure out what our authorities are and, kind of what our left and right limits are. And so I had an attorney that guided me through a lot of that. So I would try to figure out, how far can we pull this thread without getting into trouble, because the client needs certain things. And we have to be that, as you know, better than me, kind of that voice of reason and, bring some common sense into it because a lot of times clients are panicky or, they've lost everything or whatever it might be. And so trying to figure out what our authorities are, what our boundaries are, what our legal limitations are, which I never really had to think about, on the government side.
That's a good point, actually, right? Because you've got that infrastructure set up that protects you slightly or guides you. And then when you're in the private sector, well, not that you're on your own, but you could be, and that could be, for some investigator or some security professional, quite challenging. What about transferable skills, Brig? With all of the stuff that you've done for the government, are there transferable skills that you can use in the private sector? Are there challenges there? Does it make you do things a certain way? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that, I love being an investigator, whether it's on the public or private side. I love, getting a new, challenge in front of me, everything, every day is different, right? But that transferable skill, I think, is you're bringing in that investigative experience. So, it's like in the FBI, we had to fulfill once a month duty agents. So you got to sit in the office and you had to take all the walk-ins and you had to take all the phone calls, and as you can imagine, it's very interesting. People come in and they, some of them, you start listening to their story and it sounds very legitimate. And then it becomes, there's aliens in my backyard. And then you start, kind of picking up on some things. But I think the repping of the investigations, I think that's a transferable skill. So like at this point, I think that, if someone called me today and said, hey, I was defrauded out of, $500,000 and it was through, let's say, Nigeria. I've kind of been there. I've repped that a little bit. And so I kind of have some ideas of, okay, first steps, and what's the landscape of Nigeria as far as can we get money back, restitution or whatever it might be. So I think the skill really is that, kind of repping past performance, that kind of thing, that you're going to carry with you forward.
How do you see the industry changing? Because we are facing challenge after challenge at the moment in the private sector in terms of fraud, AI, deepfake, crypto. How do you see where we are now and where this industry is going?
Boy, I think it's so much more complicated at this point, Mike. And I'm really not in the investigative sector right now, but I see it a little bit from where I sit. And I have an AI company, so I'm tracking everything that's going on with AI. I'm also tracking the good, bad, and ugly of what we're going to probably see this year. So I think it's, the bad news is it's only going to get worse, right? And that makes it more difficult for the investigator, right? So the deep fakes, AI, just obfuscation of moving money around. I worked a money laundering project for 3 years. That's all I did,
Oh, wow.
to see how people move their money. So unfortunately, I think essentially the criminals are really on offense, and we're really playing defense a lot more now because, as we all say, like a lot of criminals have nothing else to do. They don't have a job, and they're sitting
Mm.
around figuring out how can I defraud people without working too hard. And so they figure out efficient ways to do that through AI, deepfakes, all these things, the Instagram accounts and all this, and moving money through different accounts and offshore. It's just going to make this much more difficult. The good side of it is, if you love being an investigator, like it's going to be more interesting every day. So, but you've got to stay up with it. You've got to kind of be ahead of it. One of the things I'm tracking now with AIs, we're going into agentic AI, where there's a proactive agent that can be employed by criminals to open up the back door to steal data from companies and things like that. And I think, again, the experts are saying the end of 2025, we're really going to see some dark activities on the AI side.
Yeah, I can only agree with you. Talk to me about the money laundering. You're saying money moving around, 3-year projects. What insights could you give people that are listening to now that have got maybe potentially working on a money laundering situation or a victim of a money laundering scam? What points would you give someone to look out for?
I think that it's a little bit like parents, where people make fun of people that are helicopter parents that are closely watching their kids, right? And I think we need to embrace that with our money as well. Your bank accounts, keep a close eye on it. Your credit cards, things like that, because these scammers are, again, getting more sophisticated, becoming more efficient, and kind of opening up wider swath of who they're trying to reach. And they are essentially, what's happening is, if someone's going to steal money, they want to have numerous touch points with it. So if money is taken, what I need to do as a money launderer is I need to, move that through an offshore account, and then purchase a car, sell that car, send it to, a foreign country, have a, contact there that then wires it back to me or sends it back in crypto, things like that. So I think the biggest thing for the potential victim or the victim is, keep a close eye on your bank accounts. I mean, I do it because I've been defrauded, through my bank accounts, and so I think we can't be, you can't, be looked at and judged if you are kind of a helicopter person with your accounts anymore. You've got to stay close and watch that, because the problem is, Mike, as you know, once that money's gone, it's real difficult to grab that and get it back. So, so I think overall, just staying real close to what your financial situation, your accounts, and things like that.
Yeah, thanks for the advice, Brig. What's your opinion on private-public synergy, having investigators on different sides or security professionals on different sides collaborating or working together for the better good?
Yeah, I mean, I think my first go-to response on that is, I'm a big fan of relationships with others, right? So I've never done anything on my own. I've always had help. I've always collaborated, whether it's an association, or if it's essentially someone in the private sector at a company that has much more knowledge about how things work in that sector than I do. I can learn so much from them. The FBI had InfraGard, and that was amazing. Private-public partnership. It still is. And I learned so much from folks that are out in the crypto industry, for instance, or the water industry, or whatever, things that I don't know. And I'm a lifelong student, so I think learning a lot, but also collaborating, and again, just working with others. I have a bad habit of calling people and calling Mike in London and saying, Mike, I've got a situation. I know you've seen this before. Can you give me some advice? And so I think that, bringing some kind of humility into it, that I always can learn a lot more, but also I can, get a lot more. We can work together to get that synergy and investigations through that public-private partnership. I'll also tack on that, for instance, with counterterrorism investigations, boy, you can't do much unless you have someone helping you on the inside of a cell. And so, I also had great relationships in the different communities, and there was always folks that were ready to draw the line in the sand on in their own community and say, I don't want this evil here. I'm going to help you, kind of root out the problems.
That's huge, Brig. That is a skill in itself, right? You running those types of sources and keeping those relationships positive and amicable and connected, and that's a skill in itself that it's very difficult to teach, right? You have that during your journey. What about the new guys coming into the industry? What challenges are they facing? Because, when I started almost 30 years ago, and I'm sure you've been around a long time as well, things were different back then. And now with the newer guys coming in, what advice could you give a young, keen investigator, security professional coming into the private sector? How would you guide them? How would you mentor them?
Yeah, boy, we could probably spend 2 weeks talking about that, right? Because it's such a critical topic. And I think a lot of people bring in their own personality, their own motivation, and how they were raised and things like that. And some are more motivated than others. I think, the one thing I remember, and this is a little bit visceral to me, is I went to the FBI Academy. I'm a total introvert, and they were like, "We're going to teach you to interview people. We're going to teach you to develop informants." And I was thinking, I can't do this. I'm not real
Mm,
great at building relationships. I'm shy and things like that. But what I did afterwards is I said, I'm going to find the people that are good at this, and I'm going to follow them. I'm going to watch them, and I'm going to be mentored, by them, whether they like it or not. And so I found a couple of those sage investigators and
mm,
amazing interviewers, right? Because interviewing is so critical. And I just said, hey, can I sit in the room with you in this interview? Can I watch through the glass? Can I learn from you? Can I follow you, in your investigative path on this case type thing? And so I would just encourage younger folks or people that are walking into it is, have some humility that you don't know a whole lot, and find someone, like yourself, Mike, who's done kind of everything, and say, I'm going to learn from that guy, and really even just be honest and say, do you mind if I just, if you don't mind guiding me, I'm going to take notes. I'm going to watch you. I'm going to butcher things, but I'm going to learn things. And so, I think that, and then I think the second thing is eyes wide open as far as what you just mentioned, all the new complications for the investigator versus, the criminal. So the AI, the deepfake, all these things, the money laundering and how sophisticated it is, just again, be a student and try to learn everything you can about the, as we say, tactics, techniques, and procedures of the criminal. I think those things together, get you, a decent launch. I saw in the FBI a number of times where a brand new, agent would come in and he knew it all,
mm.
and that just wasn't a good start, right? As you can imagine. And everyone on the floor knew that he knew it all, and if you didn't pick it up, he would tell you that, So I think that's not a great approach, and it just makes it difficult from the outset. So I think eyes wide open, be malleable, be teachable, and find that mentor that's been doing it 30 years and just say, I just want to learn from you.
3 qualities, if you were recruiting an investigator, what would those top 3 qualities you would look for a young investigator that's coming in saying, Brig, give me a shot? What characteristics would you look for?
Two things I always go to, and this goes to more to leadership, Mike. I always look for competency and capacity. Those are, two of the three I'll say. Competency is, someone walking in that can just keep up and kind of figure things out, as an investigator. And I remember doing a file review with an FBI agent years ago when I was a supervisor. And he said, I just can't understand the difference between a case and a lead. And I just thought, he's never going to get this. A lead is something that comes in from another officer you're supposed to go do. A case is your case. So I think that confidence, just the general being able to come in, have that wherewithal, having some, awareness of your surroundings and what an investigation should look like, coupled with capacity. When I hire people, I also look for, how's this guy going to do when we're in jet lag and we just landed in, Yemen, and we got to hit the ground running, and I'm tired and I'm hungry, and it's whatever the situation is. So capacity is huge in the investigative world. As you know, you go to Nairobi, and you're tired and you're dealing with a different culture, and then you're sick from the food, whatever it may be. So I think confidence, capacity, and then I think also, again, I've got to go to teachable. Teachable, I think, is so critical. If you're not teachable, you're kind of stuck. There's an inertia piece, and you're just not going to get much farther. I'm going to add a fourth one, Mike.
Okay.
I don't want to offend you, or disappoint you, but I've got to add in a team player. I think, again, you and I and 5 other people land in Nairobi, like, we need everyone to work together in situational awareness tactically, right? We need everyone to jump in, whatever the requirement is. But we also just need someone who's not keeping book on each other, trying to get others in trouble. It's just a great,
Mm.
team player overall. So I'm sorry I added a fourth on you.
No, no, completely. And you know what? When we keep talking about it, there's always more that can come out of this, right? But no, I
For
agree.
sure.
Team player for someone that's not even coming into the industry, just being in the industry, right? You need to be a team player because there's going to be situations where you need to rely on your team, and if you have no confidence in the people that are standing right next to you, you're putting yourself in a challenging position. I want to move on to your leadership, Brig, and the leadership roles that you've had, and the leadership philosophy that you live by in terms of whenever you're running your company or your previous positions in running these operations around some of the most challenging places on the globe. When you're projecting that leadership stance, what are you looking to achieve? What are you trying to get from the team around you? How do you position yourself to make your leadership successful?
Yeah, I think that no matter what situation we're in, whatever leadership billet you're in, I mean, for me, there's a few tenets, right? I get a mission from above, I get commander's intent, whatever it might be, and then we have to accomplish a mission, right? And so we've got folks that, we've got to run. I have, as a, leader in the FBI, I had, anywhere from 30 to 80 people, right? When I was in the military, I ended up, on a kind of temporary billet as a company commander. And in the airborne infantry, I had 220 paratroopers, right? So depending on the size, you kind of alter your leadership. But overall, I take in that mission. And I think number one, I want to make sure that we have a great plan, right? And I can turn into a micromanager and scrutinize things real quick if I need to. But I always found that I had amazing people. There were always that top 10%er folks that, boy, they had a better plan than I could come up with, right? And so I made sure that we had a good plan, and I was overseated to make sure that was the situation. I think number two is I'm going to make sure the folks that work for me have what they need. So no one loves meetings, but I always had like a Monday morning meeting, and I just went around the room and just said, what do you need? Well, I need help with surveillance, or I need tech equipment and I can't get it. Those kind of things. So making sure that people have, what they need. And then I think also, for me, shielding from above, right? So I think we've all worked for
Mm.
difficult leaders. The FBI, we had some difficult leaders that I worked for, and to the point of some above me saying, I don't trust any FBI agent, and that makes it very difficult to accomplish a mission. And sometimes you just have to shield some of the nonsense that you deal with from above. And then I think, finally, I'm going to hold people accountable. I've fired people like you have, but I sit down, again, doing a file review and saying, how are you doing on this case? And the top 10%ers, you don't even really need to have that, but you still sit down. But then there's folks that just aren't moving the ball down the field, right? And so I've got to hold them accountable, and so sometimes you got to flip that switch. For me, I don't like to, but I will, and just make sure that, we are progressing the case. So
Mm.
I think that accountability is critical. So it's that whole, I'm your best friend, but I can also be your worst enemy. We all, and as a leader, sometimes you've got to be in that position.
Completely. And over your career, Brig, what's your proudest achievement?
I'm going to go back to what I mentioned to you, Mike, about 1998. So we go to, I don't know if we talked about it in this or maybe before we started, but 1998, I went over with a team of FBI agents, and Al Qaeda had attacked the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, Kenya, and also Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And for me, I was I was working organized crime at the time, and that was fascinating. But I was so intrigued by this, Mike. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know anything about this group. I don't know anything about the ideology or what their intentions are. Obviously, it's nefarious, but this is all I want to do. And so it started with, there's this tall Arab guy named Osama bin Laden that, enabled this attack, right?
Mm.
And so my career was really kind of started with him in a way and ended with him. And that I spent my career working Al Qaeda and then later ISIS. But then 2011, I was embedded with Special Operations Command at DoD. I was the FBI senior, and Osama bin Laden was, killed by SEAL Team 6. And so I'm not claiming that, but I just kind of look at my career and my overall, success. And I say this in complete humility. I had the privilege of, thwarting that evil any way I could, even if I was chipping away a little bit. I kind of spent many years doing what I could, as a one person who worked with a lot of great people to kind of thwart that along the way. 9/11 happened. I went to Cairo, Egypt, and worked the only Egyptian hijacker, Mohammed Atta. And then after that, a lot of experience working that stuff. Rotating over, worked in, the embassy in London, working counterterrorism out of there. So just doing my small part along the way, I call a victory in my career.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us, Brig, and thank you for your service. That's excellent. Really, really, really proud to be speaking to you today, Brig, and I love the conversations we're having. So talk to me now about what you're doing at the moment. What sort of work are you doing? How can you help the people that are listening?
So now, kind of the quick, wave top history on this is some guys I know had an AI company for 10 years, amazing AI company. It was focused on entertainment industry, but had incredible capability. They came to me with a vision and they said, we want to move this capability in because things are moving towards AI, as you know, Mike, into kind of the private sector, to military, to law enforcement. And so they asked me to lead that. So I have come in and we have this Blue Atlas group as our company. We started at the beginning of the year, and that's what I'm doing is we're moving this capability plus into all these sectors. And the whole how it's different is this AI is private, it's siloed, it's restricted, it's military grade encryption. This is not OpenAI, this is not ChatGPT, where everyone is putting their data in. Each client has their own data set, and it can't be breached by threat actors. And so, speaking of the money laundering, we overwatch everything that happens with the data to make sure that there's no poisoning of it or bias and things like that. So that's what I'm doing is we've moved this AI into kind of the private realm, DoD, we're doing some amazing things for law enforcement. Like it's amazing. You can put a case in, you have a certain case, you put it into this AI, and then you can ask questions against investigative reports. It monitors deception in interview videos of suspects. It makes a verbatim transcript of your interview of a suspect, like real time. And it also can recreate crime scenes through kind of multi-modal, techniques and things like that. So it takes in videos, photos, all different types of Word documents, PDFs, whatever it may be, handwritten notes, and it just gives you a forum to ask questions against the case. So it's pretty fascinating. Again, I'm learning every day.
That sounds amazing. I could probably use that bit of software on most of the cases I've got running at the moment. If anyone is listening and wants to know more about the Blue Atlas Group, there's the details are coming up on the screen now. Contact Brig. I'm sure he'll give you his time and expertise to let you know how it all works. Brig, you need to look at joining some of the global associations with that product, the WAD being one of them, the World Association of Detectives. Look it up because your skill sets, your background, and what you're bringing to the industry could be used on a global scale. So maybe you can have a look at that, and we can maybe chat offline.
I would love to do that. I see kind of some things that you posted, Mike, about it. I also see what WAD is doing, and I'm actually super impressed. And I would love to get vouched in if someone's willing to do that into the organization. It feels a little bit like that because I think there's some great people in it. I know that you're not going to bring in somebody that's incompetent, things like that. But if there's a possibility of me having a touch point and maybe joining, I'd love to do that.
Fantastic, Brig. Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. I hope everyone's enjoyed this conversation. We're listening to Brig Barker. Thanks, Brig. Have a great day. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thanks again, Mike. Cheers.